Welcome to the NDLB Podcast with your host, Nick.
Why, thank you there, Mr. Robot. It is me. It is I, Nick. And I've decided that it is time to bring back the podcast. And since it's the end of the 2052 season, I figured what better time than now to get it underway. We got a lot of topics to talk about, mostly to do with the voting system that we had at the end of the year, team of the year, and then finally the elephant in the room, the Boston situation. So without further ado, let's get started. First topic at hand is the talk about realignment again. And this time it got rejected, which is kind of funny because usually it gets approved and then we go through the same process year after year. Whatever team is dominating gets one division. One team decides that they're going to try to beat them and joins them, and then the final three spots are filled by teams that are near the end of the draft who have no choice but to go there, and thus no real division is fun. The current divisions have already created rivalries. Most people who want to be together have somehow been together. The AL East is the AL East. People in the NL West have been in the NL West. In fact, teams like Washington have been pretty much NL their entire existence. Philadelphia as well, even though he's not as active. And at this point, it makes no sense to do because some people actually set their teams up to battle the teams in their division. I know it's a crazy thought that you would look at the teams you're facing, see what's weak and what's strong with their teams, with the exception of Boston, and try to set your team up accordingly. Moving on, and let me just apologize now if it sounds a little choppy. It's been a while since I've talked on a mic and forget the flow and pattern of this, and usually it's supposed to be organic, but for some reason I want it to be good, so there's a lot of jump cuts, so if my voice changes, that's obviously why. Moving on to the next topic, just looking at this, is the draft is officially Stats Plus. I actually missed my first round pick this year because I forgot about it, but it ended up being a good pick. And looking at the way that Stat Plus is built and the ability of people to code these days is much better than it used to be. I see no reason why we shouldn't use Stat Plus. The only downside is that it doesn't have our ratings for our scout, but that makes sense because I'm guessing it grabs a uniform code that's within the game for the OSA ratings, and there's no way they could probably get each person's individual scouting number without the ability of being exploited by people who know how to use code. Blah, 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 blah. Point is, Stats Plus is probably the best way we can go. When you do it in the game, as fun as that is, it leaves it up to a lot of randomization. You're not exactly going to set up your draft list for, say, one pitcher, one batter, one pitcher, one batter. And there's a chance that one position could be drafted multiple times, and that's simply unfair. At least with Stat Plus, if you're away from the computer and miss a pick, at least you see what's been taken. You can change your picks accordingly, and it's done relatively quickly, all things considered. So it's a good thing. Moving on, people finally got their wish. 7-day sim. I've never been on this side. I understand why people like it because it's an obsessive game, and you want it every day. And I can't lie, there's some Sundays I wake up where I wish I could download a file. But doing 7 days a week just makes the season go by so quick that I almost feel like you don't appreciate the season. Like someone made note of recently, as soon as playoffs come, we're all just thinking about rollover. Then what's the point of playoffs? That's the whole point of the season, is to win it all. And yet we get to that point of the season and we're just excited about going to the next one. With 7 days, you're doing almost 2 months a week. You couldn't tell me what happened a month ago in season. And it just seems a little quick. But if that's what the people want, and I voted for it, I believe, just because most people wanted it, then we're going to get it. And now that my team's better, I guess it's a little more enjoyable. So there's that. The one thing I hope passes, and I doubt it will, but, is lowering of injuries. And 1 second, I need to take a drink. This one, I have my own reasoning for. The reason I think we should lower injuries is not because it's unsim, but because of our inability to see these people in real life. This game is text-based. We don't have the opportunity to look at each player and be like, so-and-so is forever hurt. When you look at pros, you know who's made of glass, you know who sucks, you know who's battling injuries. In our game, we have text. When we're doing trades, people barely want to spend an hour on the game as is. Imagine going through every player's injury history, checking out how many games they played relative to their injuries, and see if they're worth it. To us, it's just harder to see injuries and predict injuries. And I mean, in real life, injuries happen, and even the most durable players get hurt. But like people like Max Scherzer brought up, that it's very low percentage to develop Tommy John after a certain age if you've never had it before. Things like this we see in players. We see that a player has a good workout plan, a good work ethic, this, that, and everything else. So we know the type of player they're going to be. In a text-based sim, we just see the word fragile. We see durable. We see normal. The injuries themselves are normal length. Like you can look at a team. Toronto last year was devastated by injuries in real life. Teams all around the league get devastated by injuries, but you can see them kind of coming. You take that risk. For example, against Toronto, they take Troy Tulowitzki. They know he's glass, but they know this. It's harder in game unless you see like a player, for example, on my Miami team, Greg Scott, who is going to be hurt every year without fail. At least I know this now, and going forward, Fragile is taken off my list. But it shouldn't be that way, or that extreme, so to speak, because that's a lot of players lost every year. That seems to be all the votes we had to do, with the one exception that I will talk about in a minute. I just wanted to speak on the topic of the Team of the Year that I decided to do. So as you notice, for a couple of years now, I've been doing Team of the Years. That's kind of just my thing to give back because I enjoy making images and it's the easiest thing for me to make. Downside is that it seems to be dominated by one team, and that's why I try to space it out with 3 max players. Hopefully people enjoy it because in 2053, I was going to keep this under wrap, but I feel like I'm going to be sending out a Google form with everyone with a nice organized way. Let me segue for a second. That is one thing I hate about OOTTB is that you cannot sort in the Hall of Fame. If so, I would do it based on certain numbers, and it would be so much easier to look through the numbers to vote for who I want to be in. Same thing goes for the All-Star game. Doing pitchers and doing relievers and starters, is just hell. Sometimes I have to look through, and if I'm only voting for 3 guys, I'll start saying the lowest number to myself, and then changing it once I see somebody higher, and it just gets to be too much. And that's why sometimes I don't vote. Anyways, going back to that topic, for next year's Team of the Year, I want to make it so everyone votes for the team. So what I think I'll do is I'll send out a Google form with either a WAR or higher level statistics and lower it down so it's easier for people to vote. Gives them there's only these 3 or 4 names per position. It's not 25 names like pitching. And have the people decide. It'll be all in private and won't be able to see each other's except for me at the end, and I'll calculate the votes and I'll post it. I think that'll actually be better because there's a lot of discrepancy when I do it by numbers because there's certain numbers I value that other people don't. I don't care about stolen bases. I don't care about certain things with pitching. I value certain things with pitching that others don't. In fact, you could probably argue that Wes Nelson pick was a sketchy one at best, but he had the 3rd lowest FIP, which helped him. He also had a high K to BB rate, and he had great numbers anyway: 16-4, 3.05 ERA, 1.08 WHIP. Not exactly the greatest. I had to burp there. 6.4 WAR, but he didn't play in every game. He only played 182 innings. Pro rate over 210. He's probably a 7.5 WAR. But I enjoy it, so I want to get as many people involved with it as I can and make it more interactive. So maybe I'll add through the year at the All-Star game. Maybe the All-Star players will get some cards or something like that. One day I hope to learn enough JavaScript to make like a program that could make like a card collection where you could open them on the site and record it and shit like that. But that's pretty ambitious and long-term thinking. And so I want to keep this kind of short because normally I could talk for hours and I'm starting to get my voice back. The final topic on this is Boston. If you don't know, check the thread out. If you do know, what the hell? I see both sides of it. I understand that people think it sucks, but put yourself in the shoes of him. Like, if you had a good team, would you want to lose it? I don't understand so much why he wants to give up the team. You assembled this team, you want these players, enjoy them. People had to give up something to get them. You've made Boston, I'm speaking to you like Corey's the only one listening. But Boston's made bad trades. I've got 2 great players off him for a great player. Sometimes you got to do it. But I mean, at the end of the day, he put the team together, and it's his team, and he's having fun with it. And the random year you pick to let those people not make the playoffs, I'll be honest with you. If I knew that we were going to do this trade, maybe once my number 1 and number 2 pitcher went down for the season, I would have tanked the rest of the year because I wouldn't have signed Pedro Hernandez, and then I would have got somebody in this little draft we're having. But I didn't because that's lame, and I faced him in the playoffs, won 1 game off him. He beat me in 4. We had some battles. It's not like every game was a shit beating. I mean, there were a couple, but they were expected. But my team's going to be better. His team's going to be better, and it's going to make it fun. I don't think people who aren't even in his division should complain because the only time you'll see him is one time in the playoffs and maybe in the finals if you're on the other side. It's teams in his current division, all of which minus Shell, don't care about it, that should really be worried. And if we're not worried, you guys shouldn't be worried. With that being said, I think this will be the end of the first podcast. Hopefully I don't get in trouble because every time I post with music, they get me with our monetization or some copyright shit. But have a good night, NDL, and stay safe.